Hey, hey, hey! My name's Helianthus Cryptid, or Nephilim if you'd prefer. Welcome to my cozy corner of the internet. The second chapter of Sitting in a Tin Can, written by Aurorian on AO3, is here! How do I begin to describe how happy I am with the reception the first chapter and prologue got when I uploaded it? Thank you all so much. I'm quite excited to delve deeper into this story, so let's get right into the trigger warnings before I begin the chapter. This fanfiction includes topics that may be triggering to some viewers if you are likely to be affected by any of the following: implied homophobia, implied prostitution, and implied drug dealing. Then please consider listening to one of my other videos, such as the Adro series, which is written by XX Cypress Minerva XX. Now I implore you to sit back and relax whilst I read to you. Chapter 2. Nothing I Can Do. Sugawara Koshi knew the second his eyes landed on Kaito that his world was about to be turned upside down. Familiar brown hair, brown eyes, and a smile so nostalgic that it knocked the air out of his lungs and all the thoughts out of his head but one. The Great King. Oikawa Kaito? He had read out loud only seconds prior, because it was the first day of school and he liked to pin the new names to the new faces. Kaito had replied with a very confident, "Present, Sugawara-sensei!" And without a second thought, his attention shifted to whatever the boy next to him had just whispered. Suga watched the two boys in the third row from the front hide their laughs with their hands, and he felt his jaw drop to the floor. This boy was 11. So he must have known Oikawa, his Oikawa, the seemingly dauntless Alba Josai volleyball captain, before he had vanished, but he didn't seem sad. Not sad like the rest of his family was when the case turned cold only a few weeks into the search. And not sad like Iwaizumi Hajime was when Suga saw him staring at nothing in the grocery store. "Are you okay, sensei?" one of the girls in the front row asked, with her eyebrows furrowed together and her head tilted in curiosity. Suga closed his mouth and looked down at the girl. "I'm fine, Asumi," he said with a bright, albeit very forced smile. "I'm just thinking about how much fun we'll have this year." Suga wasn't deluded. He knew that he had never been friends with Oikawa Toru. Their volleyball teams played against one another a few times in his third year of high school, but they were never friends. But still, it was difficult to forget someone like him. And just when he thought he might be starting to, an 11-year-old boy with his face showed up and sat in Suga's class. Looking at Oikawa Kaito felt like looking at a ghost. He learned later on that Kaito was Oikawa's nephew. He had two, Kaito and his older brother, Takaru. During the first few weeks of school, Suga watched Kaito interact with his classmates. The young boy was confident and ambitious, which were apparently family traits because Suga remembered Oikawa mostly through how he played volleyball as a setter and a captain. And those were qualities he seemed to have both on and off the court. One thing that confused Suga, though, was Kaito's grades. He seemed to do quite well in class. He listened to Suga during lessons and didn't get distracted, but the work he handed in was either very poor or not completed at all. Usually, Suga would pull the students aside after class and try to channel his inner Sawamura Daichi, but Oikawa Kaito was a different case. Suga knew it wasn't fair on the students he'd previously berated for incomplete work, but he couldn't picture himself doing the same to the friendly boy who looked like his former volleyball rival. Sometimes just being in the same room as Kaito gave Suga whiplash. But he knew he had to do something, for the sake of Kaito's academic future. So, a month into the first term of the school year, Suga had finally psyched himself up enough to keep Kaito off the class to talk about his grades. "I know why you called me back, sensei," Kaito said, as the last of his classmates left the room. Their shouts of laughter echoed through the hall outside. "Really?" Suga asked, and rounded his desk. He leaned against the edge of it and faced Kaito, who was still seated in his chair. "Why's that?" Kaito shrugged a little. "My homework sucks." Suga breathed out a small laugh and nodded his head. "Yeah, pretty much." "You're not going to tell my mom, are you?" Kaito pulled on the loose spread that hung from his left sleeve. "She'll kill me." "Nah." Suga navigated the rows of desks and sat down in the one in front of Kaito. He turned to face the boy with a smile. "I don't want any homicides happening on my watch." Kaito nodded and tugged on the thread one last time before dropping his hands onto one of his open notebooks. "Thank you, Sensei." Suga shrugged and mustered up a smile. "No worries," he said. "But I do want to know why your homework sucks. You seem to understand the material when we do it in class." "I guess," Kaito muttered, his eyebrows scrunched together for a second before he said, "It's easier when you're explaining it, I think. When I'm at home, I sort of forget what to do, and the textbooks are kind of confusing." "Yeah, they kind of are," Suga agreed with a hum. "Does your mum help you with it at home?" Kaito shook his head. "Sometimes Takaru will explain some of it to me, but he has his own homework to do, so it's only sometimes." Suga suppressed a frown. "Who else helps you with your homework?" he asked and leaned a little forward in his seat. "Sometimes my dad does, but I don't really like asking my parents for help," Kaito said with a shrug. Suga didn't ask why. He already knew. He had seen the Oikawa family break down firsthand. The Oikawa case went cold just under 5 years ago, and Suga had the unfortunate luck of witnessing Oikawa's sister lose it completely. It had been a case of wrong place, wrong time for Suga. It was one of the rare weekends that Asahi had been home in Miyagi, so Suga had treated him to lunch at one of the few cafes that the local teenagers didn't know existed. He remembered sipping on an Americano, listening to Asahi go over a few new pieces he was thinking of adding to his portfolio when the sound of a chair falling to the floor caught his attention. Both he and Asahi turned around to look at the commotion, and Suga distinctly recalled that almost everyone in the cafe winced when they realized who it was. Oikawa Kanami had stood up from her seat so quickly that it had fallen back. Suga wanted to avert his gaze, but something about watching someone sob so heavily into their elbow was mesmerizing in the most horrifying way possible. The man, a policeman, Suga realized when he caught sight of the navy vest she was with, reached up to put a hand on her shoulder, but Kanami knocked it away and breathed in a shaky breath. It broke into another loud sob, and she grabbed her purse and ran. It was announced the next day that the police would stop looking for Oikawa. Suga imagined that Kaito felt bad for coming to his family with problems as small as math homework, and his heart ached in sympathy. "How about this?" he began after a moment of thought. "Every day after school, I can help you with your homework. What do you think?" Kaito pushed the tips of his fingers together and hummed. "I don't know," he said. "I think I gotta ask my mom. And I don't want to cause trouble for you or something, Sensei." Suga smiled down at him. "It's no trouble, Kaito. Don't worry. I stay after school to grade papers anyway. I could use the company." Kaito nodded his head. "Okay, I'll see what my mom says, but I gotta go now. I don't want to keep her waiting." Suga watched Kaito pack up his things and basically sprint out of the door with half of the papers flying out of his hands. He shook his head with a smile. "I'll see you tomorrow!" he called out before the boy vanished around the corner at the end of the corridor. Suga let his smile drop as soon as he turned around and sighed into his hands. He wondered how the Oikawas were still functioning when that boy was almost a clone of their lost son. Suga became a teacher 1 year ago, when he was only 23. He started out as a substitute in a small school in Miyagi, but Lady Luck seemed to have been smiling down on him the day he got that job because the teacher he had been filling in for decided to retire instead of coming back after her hip surgery. Although the school wasn't ideal, he had a 2-hour commute every morning, which consisted of a train ride and 2 buses. He knew that he was fortunate to get the job, and he loved every second of it. He had known he would ever since he decided to go down the elementary school route. Suga's knack for teaching started in his 3rd year of high school, and whenever he was asked about it, he liked to give credit to Hinata Shoyo, or better yet, Hinata Shoyo's god-awful receives. Teaching his kohai how to actually dig a ball really put Suga on the path that got him to where he was. And it didn't hurt that Hinata looked like an elementary schooler at the time either. When Karasuno lost to Kamo Medai during his final year in high school, Suga knew that there wouldn't be many scouts knocking on his door with offers, especially considering the fact that he had been on the bench for most of his 3rd year, but his experience being the vice captain of a team that got to nationals helped land the job he had now. Suga was happy to spend at least 1 day a week advising the elementary school volleyball club, and he had said so during the job interview, which was probably what landed him the job in the first place. The school's athletic clubs were mediocre at best and atrocious at worst. The sloppy spikes and messy receive performed by the kids reminded him of a time that was much happier, a time where Oikawa Toru babysat his nephews, and they weren't too worried about their parents to ask for help. It was a pity too, because over the next month or so, Suga noticed that Kaito had a lot of potential. When he got down to work and asked for a little help, his understanding of most of his classes was above average. For a brief and very bitter moment, Suga resented Kaito's parents for forgetting about their own son before he composed himself and remembered what they were going through. But still, Suga couldn't understand how someone could forget about such an intelligent child, especially when that child was their own. Every day, Kaito sat at his desk quietly while Suga graded tests and homework assignments that were barely eligible. He raised his hand occasionally to ask a few questions about the wording in the textbook or to crack a little joke about the illustrations on the pages. Eventually, Suga's curiosity got the better of him, and he found himself asking Kaito the question he'd been actively avoiding for the past 2 months of their silent meetings. "Why are you so nervous to ask your parents for help?" he asked one day when Kaito had finished the reading Suga had given that day in class. Kaito closed his book and lined it up with the corner of the table before shrugging. "Guess I don't want to bother them," he explained. "They go away a lot, and when they get home, they're always really tired." Suga felt his eyebrows raise of their own accord. Usually he had a spectacular poker face around his kids, but with Kaito, it was becoming exceptionally difficult. "Where do they go?" he asked. "I think they go to my grandparents' house," Kaito said. "They go like every week and then they just cry a lot and stuff." Suga wondered if the Oikawas had buried an empty casket. He felt guilty that he didn't know, but it would make sense. After 5 years, it would be nice to have somewhere to visit and talk to a missing relative, especially if they had disappeared without a trace. "That must suck," Suga muttered, because he didn't know what else to say. Kaito simply shrugged.
It does, he admitted. But I don't mind hanging out with you at school, Sugawara-sensei. It's more fun than at home, 'cause I'm always by myself there.
Suga swallowed even though his mouth was dry and smiled down at his student with a thumbs up.
I like hanging out with you too, Kaito. You're good company.
That night when he got home to his shitty one-bedroom apartment, the conversation was still fresh in Suga's mind. An 11-year-old boy shouldn't talk about loss as if he were only commenting on the weather. He shouldn't prefer sitting with his teacher after school because he was too lonely at home. But Suga didn't know how to fix any of it. He tried not to dwell on it, and instead he stripped down to his underwear, climbed under his duvet, and tried to mute his thoughts by sticking in his earphones and listening to the loudest noise he could find on full volume. Obviously, that didn't work. Because Oikawa Toru had gone missing, and he didn't think anyone cared enough to look for him. The detectives had given up after a measly 3 weeks, and everyone else had seemingly forgotten about it entirely. On top of the fact that his student was suffering because of the consequences of Oikawa's disappearance, Suga felt like no one had tried hard enough to find him. Sure, they had never exchanged more than a few words off the volleyball court, but no one deserved to be abandoned, and Suga was willing to do anything to help. As he finally began to settle down, he grabbed his phone from under his pillow and shut off his music. And then Suga left a voicemail to a number that had sat dormant in his phone for the past year.
Hey Daichi, it's Sugawara Koshi, in case you forgot. It's been a while, right? I'm sure you're busy keeping the streets of Miyagi safe and all, but do you want to hang out soon? I know I'm calling at a pretty late time, and I was thinking it might be nice to see each other again. Catch up, maybe go out for a coffee or something. Call me back when you can.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate all the support you've given me. This was a heavy topic to read about, but it was so worth it. I apologise for how long this has taken. I got sick, but now I'm healthier and ready to continue. If you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments below. All credits go to the original creator of this fanfiction, or Rorian, on AO3. I'd highly appreciate if you gave this video a like and you subscribe to the channel, and you hit the notification bell to be notified of when I next upload. There is no pressure to do so though. Thank you for visiting my cozy corner of the internet. Keep growing my sunflowers. Mwah!